Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my Oxygen Not Included tutorial series. In today's video we will be taking a closer look at oxygen. As the name of the game implies, oxygen is one of those resources that you will need to constantly produce for your colony to survive. One thing to always keep in mind is how much oxygen your colony is using at any given time. Each duplicant consumes 100 grams per second of oxygen, though there is a negative trait called mouth breather that can double that to 200 grams per second. There is also a positive trait called diver's lungs that reduces it by 25 grams to 75 grams per second. Since each cycle lasts 600 seconds, that comes out to 60 kilograms per cycle of oxygen per normal duplicant. In practice, it will often be a little less than that number due to the animations and other factors. One of the most important tools when diagnosing oxygen production is your Reports tab. In the bottom section of this tab, you can see how much oxygen was generated and consumed for each cycle. Hovering over these values will break them down by duplicant. I find it best practice to look through the past 3 to 5 cycles to figure out if I'm losing oxygen rapidly or if it's just fluctuating slightly. If you notice a large net loss of oxygen over multiple cycles, it's probably time to start diagnosing the problems. If you are running out of oxygen, finding a source should be your first priority. There are many methods for oxygen production within the game. Let's take a look at oxalite, a naturally occurring source of oxygen. These blue rocks are found in your starting area and will be your primary source of oxygen for the first few cycles. In the later game, oxalite can be produced through ranching of dense puffs or by using the oxalite refinery. I've set up a test case here with 20 kilograms of oxalite at around 20 degrees Celsius. You can see that when I unpause the game, the oxalite will rapidly sublimate into oxygen. Notice that once the tiles around it hit 1800 grams, the oxalite will stop sublimating. I would also like to point out that there was 3600 grams of oxalite lost as it sublimated, meaning that it loses 2 times the mass of the oxygen it produces. When oxalite is mined, it halves its mass, but will produce oxygen in a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning you do not lose oxygen by mining oxalite. You can see here that 10 kilograms of mined oxalite only loses the 1.8 kilograms that it produces. Once you begin to run out of oxalite, you will likely want to build an oxygen diffuser. This handy little machine uses 550 grams per second of algae and 120 watts of power to produce 500 grams per second of oxygen, enough for 5 normal duplicants. The oxygen it produces is always 30 degrees Celsius. It also produces 1.5 kilodTUs of heat, so the diffuser can overheat if it isn't properly cooled. I've set up another test case here for you to see that the oxygen diffuser in action. As with oxalite, the oxygen diffuser will stop producing once tiles around it are at 1800 grams or above. The oxygen diffuser is great for an early game oxygen solution, but once you start increasing your duplicant count over 5, the larger algae cost will likely force you to find new methods. Once you research basic farming, you will have access to the algae terrarium. The terrarium uses 30 grams per second of algae and 300 grams per second of water to produce 40 grams per second of oxygen at 30 degrees Celsius and 290.33 grams per second of polluted water, which means you will need 2.5 terrariums to support a single duplicant. If there is carbon dioxide around them, they will also consume it at a rate of 333.33 milligrams per second. This is not necessary for it to function, however. The terrarium will also gain a 10% bonus to oxygen production if in direct sunlight, bringing it to 44 grams per second, which is still not enough to only need 2 terrariums per duplicant. I consider the algae terrarium to be useless overall and a trap for newer players. Even though it may appear to use less algae than the deoxidizer, the water cost makes it too expensive in the early game, and the lack of automated liquid input means the time cost will never be worth it for how little you are producing. Some overseers may find a use for terrariums if they need to convert water to polluted water, but even then I believe there are better methods. I do always recommend experimentation, however, so let me know if you find a use for these little green piles of goo. The preferred method of oxygen production for most overseers is the electrolyzer. Unlocked after researching air systems, this machine uses 120 watts of power to split 1,000 grams per second of water into 888 grams per second of oxygen and 112 grams per second of hydrogen. The gas produced by the electrolyzer is at a constant 70 degrees, though the electrolyzer does produce 1.25 kilodTUs of heat, which may cause higher temperature gases to show up. Due to the constant output temperature, you can effectively delete heat by sending water in excess of 70 degrees Celsius to the electrolyzer. Be aware, the electrolyzer will not remove germs from the water, so if your water is infected with slime lung or food poisoning, they will end up airborne in your oxygen supply. Due to its ability to produce hydrogen and oxygen at the same time, as well as its heat deleting capabilities, the electrolyzer is a must-have tool for any overseer. Later in this video, we will take a closer look at how we can use the electrolyzer to create a self-powered oxygen module. Before that, though, there are a few more less direct methods of oxygen production to go over. You may have noticed a second type of oxygen in the game called polluted oxygen. This gas is very similar to oxygen and can be consumed by duplicants without any negative effects as long as it is free of germs. The biggest downside to polluted oxygen is that it will cause germs to replicate rapidly. While a bit of slime lung in your oxygen will die out over time and can be safely ignored, a polluted oxygen cloud filled with only the smallest amount of slime lung can quickly incapacitate the hardiest of duplicants. Despite the germy dangers, many overseers find polluted oxygen to be a great way to keep their duplicants breathing. Polluted dirt and rotten food will sublimate into polluted oxygen, as will slime, though only after it has been mined. You can see here that polluted oxygen is released in pockets instead of constantly like with oxalate. The process is a 1-to-1 mass conversion and will cease once the surrounding tiles reach 1800 grams. Polluted water will also periodically release pockets of polluted oxygen at random intervals. You can increase the amount of surface area of polluted water to generate more polluted oxygen. Note that any germs in the slime, polluted dirt, rotten food, or polluted water will sublimate or evaporate with the material, and the polluted oxygen will be infected. The last source of polluted oxygen comes from geysers. The polluted oxygen vent comes in two variants, hot and infected. The hot polluted oxygen vent produces polluted oxygen with no germs at 500 degrees Celsius, and the infected variant produces polluted oxygen at 60 degrees Celsius, but it is infected with slime lung. These geysers are generated randomly based on map seed. Sometimes you may find your base filled with large amounts of unwanted pollution. Luckily, we have deodorizers. These small buildings come unlocked when you research decontamination and use 133.3 grams per second of filtration medium, typically sand, to convert 100 grams per second of polluted oxygen to 90 grams per second of oxygen, while producing 143.33 grams per second of clay. A small vertical column of these can quickly clean an entire room of polluted oxygen. Now that you know a bit more about all the options available to you for oxygen production, it's time to figure out a sustainable way to keep your duplicants breathing. Before I leave you to it, I would like to show you a method used by overseers everywhere that will make it so you never have to worry about duplicants suffocating again. The SPOM, or Self-Powered Oxygen Module, was developed shortly after hydrogen power was introduced to the game. With just the right setup, it was discovered that you could use electrolyzers, gas pumps, and hydrogen generator to produce oxygen with net positive power generation from the hydrogen. Initially, this design was very unstable, but the addition of automation and gas sensors soon made the process trivial. Now you produce enough oxygen to keep your duplicants breathing while generating a substantial surplus to your colony's power system. To give you a quick overview of this very basic design, we have 2 oxygen pumps and 1 hydrogen pump to 1 electrolyzer. The pumps are connected to atmospheric sensors that are used to make sure the pumps are working at maximum efficiency by ensuring they are pumping the full 500 grams per second when they turn on. Running 2 sensors through an AND gate helps to reduce error in this process. The hydrogen is sent to a hydrogen generator that is set to turn on when the smart batteries reach 5%. As an added bonus, this entire setup is running on a single conductive power circuit, so there is no need for a transformer. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you found this video helpful. Remember to check out the next advanced research module where we will be taking a closer look at food.